trouble pinning patterns to fabric or just pinning fabric together so that you can sew it, here's the right way to pin patterns and fabric. Now, I'm well aware that there's no one right way to do anything, but there's probably some things that you are doing wrong. Dang it, now my scissors are dull. To make your sewing journey so much harder. So let's make it easier. Let's start off by talking about some of the things that you may be doing wrong that we can adjust to make it right. The first thing I've seen a lot of beginners do is they'll put the pin over the edge of the fabric. And the reason that is not helpful, it does do a very good job of keeping the pattern flat. But the reason that's not helpful is because then when you go to cut it out, your scissors are going to hit that pin and your fabric scissors are going to end up dull. And we don't want that. Something else I've also seen people do is just simply take the pin and put it into the fabric. That's really not enough to hold the fabric. It's just really loose. There's nothing. So once you get to cutting, it's not going to hold it. So you really need to go in and out. It also doesn't allow you to make everything flat if you do it that way. Another thing that you may be doing is using pins that are too short. These pins are perfectly useful to use. They work very well to pin fabric to dress forms and stuff like that. But for a beginner, sometimes it can be hard because getting that pin back through with a short pin is not as easy as getting it through with a long pin. So maybe make that adjustment. You can see I have 3 different lengths of pins here. We have the longest, we have a ballpoint pin, which is a middle size, like a typical pin, and then we have a little short pin. One other thing that would be helpful when you're using patterns that I like to mention, that's a kind of a side note, is when you are using patterns, try your best to utilize the smallest area of your fabric as possible. I could put this in the middle of my fabric and then I would be wasting everything around it. So I have this folded so that it's folded only slightly longer or wider than this little mini sleeve pattern. So that's going to help me to save all of this fabric that I can use for something else. It's something I used to get in trouble for a lot when I was a kid, learning how to sew from my mom. All right, so let's get ready to pin correctly. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the pin down through the paper, through the fabric, and then back up. Do not worry if it lifts up. I know a lot of people try to do it without lifting it up. It's gonna lift up. As long as you are able to flatten it out afterwards, then you're fine. That's why I really like these long pins. And I also like the flat head because it lays flat on the paper. In order to pin a pattern to fabric, I lay the pattern down and I always look for the corners first. I always pin my corners first. And what I don't do is, like we said, we don't pin over the edge of the pattern. So that means that I also have to find a spot on the pattern that is a little ways into the pattern, not right on the edge, because then I won't have enough room to put my ball. And look at that. That's just a mess. So we're going to go into the pattern, probably about 3/4 of an inch, and then come back up. Now we have it nice and flat. Something else I've seen people do is try to go back down. I don't know if they're trying to hide the head of the pen. If you have a really long pen, you can do that, but sometimes it causes it to bunch up more than just laying it flat. So don't be afraid of those pins, just be careful. So now I'm going to find all of the corners, come in a little ways, come back up, and make sure the head is inside the edge of the pattern. Let's do a ball. We'll come in, out, flatten. Let's do a short pin so that you can see that we can use it. It's just sometimes some people might have trouble with it. We come back up, and now we flatten. So now we have all of our edges pinned, and we can focus on the long sides or curves. When there's a long side or a curve, I'll take a pin and I'll pin from where I am away from me, because that's likely where I'm going to cut. So if I'm cutting in this direction, I want the pin in that direction so that I don't accidentally hit myself with the pin. So we're going to pin in that direction. Now, of course, you could turn it and it would be you would be cutting in the opposite direction, you know, absolutely. But if you really are trying not to stick yourself, then, you know, you can pay attention to that. So now we have it nice and flat. We're going to adjust it to make sure everything is flat. So you can move the pins in and out, because if they're pushed too far forward, they'll pucker. So we want to make sure we eliminate all the puckers. Nothing is on the outside of the pattern. And now we're ready to cut. If you are new to cutting fabric, I do have a whole video about how to cut straight, because it's the reason we want to pin correctly is because it allows us to cut straight. We want to use the whole length of the scissors blade. We do not want to just use the tips. And now that this is pinned correctly, it allows me to lift up the fabric when I need to, so that I can get as close to that paper as possible. So now we have a perfectly cut fabric that is the actual shape of the pattern. Hi everyone, I'm Angelina, and this is Blueprint DIY, where we remake our clothes to be just as unique as us. This is part of my new series called The Impatient Beginner's Guide to Sewing. And I'm so happy to announce that I'm in the middle of writing some ebooks and some comprehensive sewing guides that are gonna make your life as a beginner sewist so much easier. I'm also an upcycler, a licensed architect, and a fashion designer, so make sure you subscribe so you don't miss a thing. All right, so we're going to use this same scrap because I just cut it for this video. What if we are trying to sew this edge together? Make sure before you pin, you line the edges up and that you have a very crisp edge, because however you pin that together, that's how you're going to sew it. So we want to pin it so that these two layers of fabric stay nice and lined up and they don't begin to get off while we're sewing, especially on this stretchy fabric. First, let's talk about what may not be working for you. I've seen a lot of people try to pin on the seam where they're supposed to be sewing. I suppose it is helping you know where to sew. If that were the case, I would personally mark it with a sliver of soap, a heat erasable marker, or something like that, tailor's chalk. But if you're pinning it correctly, it could work. But notice all these pins are really in the way when I'm trying to sew. So this is just personally, as long as you're pinning it correctly, you could do this any way you want to. Pinning it up towards this direction is fine, because then when you're sewing, you can pull it out and your hand is not, you're not sewing in the direction of your hand. But now look, I'm more likely to stick myself. And if I'm gonna stick myself, y'all know if the pen is gonna stick somebody, it's gonna stick me. I pin from the side, from the raw edge inward. Make sure everything stays flat. And in this case, it's perfectly fine if the pen goes over, as long as everything is nice and flat. And the reason I like to do this, because this allows me, for several reasons, this allows me to sew for longer distances before I have to pull a pin out. And then also, because the pin head is on this side, it's very easy to pull and take it out. If it were on this side, like I'm sewing, this is my hand that's guiding it because I'm stitching it here, I can just pull the pin out and keep going. Versus now I'm sewing and I have to stop, hold it, pull this out. It just takes a longer time. So that's more a tip than anything else. Just something that may be helpful for you to make sure that you are able to keep your fabric together while you're sewing and get nice, clean stitches. Having the pins on this, going in this direction, also allows you to sew over the pins if you choose to. I have done it. I'm not recommending that you do it because that would be bad form, but it does allow you the opportunity to do that if you choose to. So now you have all the important pinning techniques you need to create successful sewing projects. And if you're a veteran sewist watching, please put in the comments some other things that you think would be helpful for our beginner sewists so that they don't give up, so that they stay motivated in this sewing journey. And if you are learning how to sew, definitely check out some of these other videos that are going to really help you level up your sewing skills much faster. All right, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss what we do next, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.